Hi, Sangeeta, how are you?
Hello, Pragya. Welcome to Masala Podcast. I'm really good. The sun shining, it
Yeah,
always helps me. Like lifts
it's a
my
lovely day,
brain
isn't
into
it?
like a different
It is
space. I don't
beautiful.
know if that's the same for you. Yeah, it really is. And I think I'm just like over the years, I've tried to kind of adjust to the cold. Like everybody says, you've got to embrace the cold, light candles, get blankets. I've tried everything, and I still hate the cold. Like so,
Yeah, I think we
conclusion is that
need
my
the
body
sun. I
isn't
think
meant
we
to be
need
here.
my
Like
skin
it's.
needs the vitamin D. It starts buzzing, otherwise I feel so lethargic.
I really think
And wearing too many
me
clothes is not the
too. Me too.
answer. That's what I keep people
Like
telling me. Just put
so true.
another
Like it's a
jumper
different
on.
place. Yeah, it isn't. It's
Yeah.
yeah. Layer on. It's not that. It's like the quality of the light. It's something to do with the light. Like I can feel it in my own brain. Anyway, it's a sunny day and we're here, and it's lovely to have you on the podcast. I wonder if you could start by telling me a little bit about kind of where you grew up, your background, and kind of even your
Yeah,
first memories of
I've
motherhood,
been
really,
thinking a
as an
lot
idea.
about like the past and my childhood, and I suppose the lockdown has kind of made me think about home and belonging and where I come from. I think it has happened to a lot of people. We are thinking about our lives a lot. Um,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
grew up in India, so I was born there in the foothill of Himalayas. My father moved around quite a lot. I'm the eldest of three sisters, and we moved around basically mostly in the north of India. I grew up there. I went to school. I changed schools every 3 years, so I don't have very clear memories of schools or school friendships that much. Um, and yeah, so that's that. And then I came here um, to do a master's and a PhD as quite a young person. I had my first daughter very young, and I've written a little bit about that in my book Motherhood. And I think needless to say, it came as a surprise. It wasn't something I'd planned or anticipated. And I've also talked about in the book how I kind of rebelled against this idea of being a mother. And in fact, a few of my school friends, we had a bet going that I would never have a child. And that was seen as such a kind of a revolutionary thing that I'm saying, I don't want to ever have children. And, and so then I had a child, and then I fell in love with her completely, and then I
Yeah,
became a mother.
yeah,
So, yeah, things don't always happen, but sometimes things happen and they're quite nice and really lovely.
yeah, yeah. What was, what are the
I
kind
saw
of
my
mothers you
mother,
saw
of
when you were
course.
growing up around you?
That is the model of motherhood I saw and I idolized. She was the mother who was always available. She was not working outside the home, so she was there for every need. If even if we were really spoiled by her at times, because even if in the middle of the night, I remember if I needed a glass of water, I would just call out to my mom and she would bring a glass of water. And she was always there constantly. We were three of us, so I don't know, she had her hands full really. I saw that mode as kind of a self sacrificing mode, a person who sacrifices everything about herself to be a mother, to imbibe this role, to be for her children, her home, her family, her husband comes first. She was quite subservient in a lot of ways. I knew she was strong, but she didn't say much and she didn't express a lot of emotions. Um, she didn't get angry, and I think that was the notion of womanhood that I was also given, that you don't raise your voice, you don't get angry. Women are supposed to be tolerant and patient and sacrifice, and that's what we do and that's what you do. And I saw that, and I think most of the role models around me were like that, the mothers who were basically their identity was to be a mother. And that's what I saw growing up. I also saw, as I grew up, not when I was growing up, but later on, I saw mothers who were working for other people, obviously, but had left their children behind in the village to work in in a in a place so that they could earn money and send back to them, and that really didn't sit right with me. I also saw that the kind of mothers who were sending their girls to work for other people in their homes because the girls weren't supposed to go to school, and they prioritized their boys' education, so in their family, and the girls were taken out of school quite young, and they were working in other people's home with them, and they came with them. And I was really upset about that, and I think it was really strange for me to see from a young age how a girl's education wasn't given a priority. Yeah,
So
yeah,
similar to kind of my ideas of motherhood as well. When I was growing up, I grew up in India, so a lot of the
yeah.
things you said really resonate. So it's the mother who's always available. It's the mother who's kind of
Mm,
whose role is to
mm.
kind of fulfill the needs of her husband and her children. And almost like she didn't exist
Yeah.
as an identity of her own. She was a mother, a
Absolutely. And I
figure that
think
kind of
all the
slotted into
Bollywood
that
films
idea of
we saw
motherhood.
growing up were like this
Uh,
Ma who was always there, who was
yes,
self-sacrifice. Yeah, Mother India, who
yes.
was patient and tolerant
Mother
and
India,
hardworking,
yes,
and didn't complain and didn't moan or didn't whinge or do everything like
yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. In fact, in
Mm,
those movies, the mother was the ultimate kind of self-sacrifice. Like, she
mm.
was, her whole role in that film was to just sacrifice for other people and be in pain and cry and wail. And yeah, I don't remember ever seeing when I was growing up, certainly, I'm sure it's changed now, that she was ever
Yeah.
like excited or happy or doing
Yeah,
anything for
and
herself. Like,
also
her
you
whole
saw
purpose of
some like
existence was for
bad
the
mothers,
children,
and I say
right?
that in quote marks because, and they were these bad women who were going out
Yes,
shopping or who weren't
yes,
always available to their children and who weren't sacrificing
yes,
themselves and who were putting their needs and who
yes,
were doing makeup or wearing nice clothes, or and we had those as well. So they were seen as bad women.
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think so interesting that you say that. And I guess this stuff we don't even think about. It's so internal, like growing
Yeah.
up. And that's kind of like the template of how to be a woman, isn't it? Like for it was for me growing up, and I'm sure it was similar for you. And you're like, this is a good woman and this is a bad woman. A good woman is a good mother, a
It
bad
is
woman is a
very
bad
binary,
mother. And that's kind of
and
so
yeah, I know,
binary,
I
right?
know that I was given more opportunities, especially by my mom, because my mother thought she hadn't had those opportunities, and she always realized that being financially independent was kind of a way forward because she didn't have that luxury or the privilege. She was dependent on my father. So she wanted to make sure that her daughters were educated, had a career, and were financially independent. That was all she could think of, so that at least she wouldn't be dependent, we wouldn't be dependent on a man. But it also conflicted with the other ideas of how to be a good girl, and that you're also a good girl, and that you're also supposed to fit into this model of how you're going to be a good wife and a good mother, but you still have to work a lot, like have a independent mind and opinions and all those as well. And I think that conflict is is a good way for her to think of us, but I think it created problems because for me, because I didn't know what I was and where I sat
Yeah.
and how much I was allowed to express my opinions, or how much I was allowed to be independent, because there were always these boundaries that were holding me back, these limits that society or her or people or families were imposing. What will people say, those kind of things.
I'm really interested, Pragya, in how you went from there, because we have similar, I think,
Yeah.
backgrounds, to thinking of motherhood like you do now. Like, what
Yeah.
was that internal
It's an
journey?
interesting question. um,
Interesting. It's
I
a big question. Yeah.
suppose it's not, doesn't happen overnight, of course. There are all these internalized beliefs
Of course.
these beliefs that or stereotypes that we internalize as well, and we start believing in them. And even though we at some level I knew these are not right, this is not how I want to be, you also feel ashamed for thinking like that, because you think this is not the right way to be. Everybody is like that. What is wrong with me? Why can't I fit into this mold? There must be something wrong with me, that I want more than this, right? And I think wanting more is not a good thing for a woman, because you shouldn't want so much more. You have everything. You have everything. Why aren't you happy with what you
No,
have?
no, no.
So I suppose it was a gradual journey of learning,
Yes.
breaking these internalized beliefs, finding myself. It sounds like such a cliche, but it's about, I think had to unlearn a lot of trauma and pain as well. And I suppose there were times when I didn't realize that I had undergone all these things, because you normalize them, we normalize them as well. We think this is what it is and this is how it's supposed to happen. Don't realize the impact it has on you as a person, and how you can pass on some of those internalized pain and trauma to your children as well. And I suppose over time, I've had to really dig deep and reflect on them and sit with that discomfort at times, because it's so uncomfortable to think of ourselves like, I made this mistake because this happened to me, but it's still my responsibility to not be like this and to not pass it on. So, yeah, reading a lot, trying to always question and challenge what I'm told. I suppose that's always been there since I was a child. And one day you realize it's okay to do that. It's okay to question and challenge. It's actually a good thing. And you also realize these are the kind of things I want my children,
Yeah,
my daughters to
yeah,
have.
yeah.
Why am I not modeling those behaviors in myself? That also happens at one stage. So it's a journey.
Absolutely. It is. I agree 100%. Now, this is a big question, but um, I guess if we start thinking about it, maybe we might get to the answer. Why are we as women still defined by
Yeah, it's a
motherhood
big
in
question,
2025?
Sangeeta, but
Why
I
is it
think
such a big
if we
deal?
look, we have to look back to where we come from, how these roles of men and women, these kind of gender norms have been defined through history, through scriptures, through through ancient philosophy and theories. And I've done a lot of that research for my next book, and I've been looking at a lot at that, about why we are here, what has defined these kind of norms or stereotypes for us, these behaviors. So if you look back to way back, there were always these kind of masculine or feminine stereotypes, right? That women are supposed to be a certain way and men are supposed to be a certain way. We also have to acknowledge and realize that men have held power for a very long time, and so the norm becomes the maleness or the man, and they also had the power and the privilege to write things, to define things, to propagate the theories and philosophy. Those are the ones who were outside in the domain talking about these things. There were also these divides set up, that women were defined by their domestic domain and women and men were defined by their political domain or professional domain, because men were more rational and logical. They were governed by their brains, while women were governed by their biology, or women were governed by their emotions, and emotions were not as reliable. And so women were confined to these domestic domains. And also there is a hint of a benevolent sexism in it, because once you say the woman is ruling the domestic domain, you make them feel really empowered, that they have control or power of something, that you've got the whole domestic domain to look after,
Yeah.
and why are you complaining? But it's not. So there is that kind of benevolence. There's still sexism or misogyny in it underlying, really, because women are not free to choose. And there are also these stereotypes that have been imposed, that women are more nurturing, they're maternal, and they are more organized, and all those kind of things. Where men are don't have that maternal instinct thing that we hear about again and again, that women have this maternal instinct, that every woman's destiny is to be a mother, every woman's choice is to be a mother, every woman can only feel fulfilled if they become a mother, because that's what our inherent desire is to be. We are told that. So again, we internalize that belief, but also if we don't internalize that, or if we don't conform to it, we feel ashamed and we feel there must be something wrong with me, or there must be something broken with me because I don't conform to this. So this carries on, this persists, and even as we go into what we think is a very gender equal world, which is not really, we are still governed by these stereotypes and tropes. We are still governed by these beliefs that women have this inherent maternal desire, that all women's desire and destiny. Obviously, it's linked to evolutionary thing that all cis women should give birth, and so they will carry on the line and the legacy and have progenies and their blood and line and everything, all that, and that's how we survive as a. So that is their value, that is their contribution. That's why we stigmatize menopause so much as well, because once they don't have this value, then they have no purpose really in life, women. So we so I think we still carry on with that. And I think even when we think we are really gender equal, there is always this pushback to push women back into those roles.
Absolutely. And I think I want to, so many interesting things you said there, and I thought I must come back and talk about those. Um, but obviously, within our culture, within South Asian culture, it's a lot more intense. So obviously, you're talking about this in the world, like this is the world we've grown up in, and this is why we are here. But South Asian society, it's even more so, I think. And some of the things you already touched upon, that the people we see growing up around us, the kind of films that we've been surrounded by. Why is it so much
Um,
more intense in our culture,
Maybe
do you think?
it's a patriarchal thing that patriarchy is so deeply rooted. I've also been really interested
Mm,
in whether we were
mm,
always
mm,
like this, or whether there's a Victorian influence on our culture in some ways because we were
mm,
colonized and they brought these
mm,
values to us, or whether
mm.
Indian society was always so much like this. Because I
Yes.
do I do think that the gender norms were more fluid in India. These gender roles were more fluid. We also had the third gender. We also
Mm,
had all those
yes.
kind of things. We were working, operating outside these binary divides, and there were empowered women, women who were ruling, and women who were in the political
Mm,
domain. So what happened? Was it
mm,
because of
mm,
colonization
mm,
that the
mm.
Victorians brought these influences and set these patriarchal roles into our society, and they became deeply embedded because obviously we still have the hangover of that, and we still believe that what happened was often people believe that it was for the
Yes.
good, and all those, and about colorism and all those things. Yes, hierarchy existed, but I think it was caste-based hierarchy. In if you look very, very in the past in India
Mm,
and Indian scriptures,
mm,
yes, I mean, saying that, yes, if you look at Indian scriptures, there is misogyny in it as well, quite deeply embedded. There is misogyny in terms of how
yes.
menstruation
Yes.
was dirty, and if
Yes.
a man came in contact with a woman who was bleeding, he would be ostracized or whatever, this kind of stigmatized, and that's really bad for him, and all those kind of things. So women's
Mm,
bodies
mm,
were always
mm.
seen as something that unsightly and there to hide away. So I think it is a very deeply patriarchal society, isn't it? We still people mourn. I mean, things have changed quite a lot. And if you watch the films on Netflix, I'm sometimes amazed by like, wow, this is
Yes.
happening in
Yes.
India.
Yes. I do.
But it's still that
Me too.
until very recently, or even
Yeah.
in some parts of India, boys are desired, a boy child, and girl childs are not desired. And there's celebrations when you have a boy, there's not celebrations, and even mourning. Some people mourn when they have a girl child. So, from the moment a child is born, or even before they are born, these things come into play, and a girl is
Mm,
born knowing that they are the second choice.
yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess even if no one says that to us, we know that from the way people around us react to us, and whether that's things like menstruation, whether
Yeah.
that's when you're told you've got to hide away in certain households, as we know, even now, girls aren't allowed to enter the kitchen
Yeah.
or come into contact with the men in their family when they're menstruating. Um, and even in some families, like you said, in maybe in smaller towns or other parts of
Mm.
South Asia, where when a girl is born, that's like a sad thing. It's like, oh my God, we've got this
Yeah.
burden now. How are we going to find money for her dowry, etc. Whereas a boy is considered, oh, he's going to bring in money, versus a girl is going to take away money, I think, from us. So I suppose that is quite
It
deeply
is.
entrenched in a
Yeah. I
lot of
mean, there's
parts of our
also this
culture.
these roles that
Um,
men are supposed to look after the women, that men are stronger. Yes, I mean, there is a
mm,
lot of safety issues. We know violence against women happens, and we know that women are more vulnerable. Women and
mm,
girls are more
mm,
vulnerable in that way. So parents worry about them. So you're always told, oh, a boy, if there's a boy or a man, they have more freedom because they are not as vulnerable, and so they are going to look after you. I know
yeah,
growing up as a
yeah,
as one of three sisters, people would look at us with pity. It's like, oh, you don't have a brother. What will happen? Who's going to look after you? Who's going to marry you off? Who's going to look after your parents when they're older? And so you grow up hating this kind of
Yeah,
message
yeah,
that you're
yeah, yeah,
getting all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
And I used to get so angry and used to tell my dad,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am your
yeah, yeah,
son. And
yeah, yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I didn't realize I didn't have to be his son. I can just be his daughter, but still be the same, you know. But there were these very strong
Just
roles
be a daughter.
against
Yeah,
son
yeah,
and
yeah.
daughters, what they were supposed to do. Yes, daughters are married off, they go to other people's
Mm.
house. So from a very young age, they know you don't belong. You belong to somebody. You're not your own person. You belong to your father or you belong to your husband's
Yes,
family. Who are you as a person? I think those kind of things
yes,
are
yeah,
yeah, changing. Yes,
yeah,
of course,
yeah.
changing. But those things matter about
Absolutely,
how a person sees themselves as well.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So true. And even, I guess, South Asian men's attitudes, because I read this in one of the articles you were quoted in, I think, about that kind of sense of patriarchy, that kind of sense of men being better than women carries on. I think it starts in childhood, where maybe our parents or neighbors or relatives pass on those messages, and then men internalize them and they carry that on. That
Yeah.
somehow we as South Asian women are lesser than, whereas the men have a slightly more, higher
Yeah, the
social
sense of
hierarchy. And
entitlement.
that
I
continues
think
as well, I
a
think.
boy is born knowing they were wanted and they desired, and that carries a sense of entitlement. So it is the
Yes,
same thing
yes,
here when we talk about racism or we talk about whiteness being the norm. It's the same as somebody knowing that they are the
mm,
majority, that
mm,
they are the norm, that they're desired and wanted, and so that
yeah,
privilege, that entitlement gives a sense of self assurance and confidence, the way they're treated, the way I still see in lots of families, the
yes,
boys are not
yes,
supposed to do any work or
mm,
chores around the house, and they are treated like on
yeah,
almost put on a
yeah,
pedestal,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
see their women and even their sisters running around and being treated
yeah,
differently. Unless we educate boys and men in a way that they understand that they have a responsibility because of that privilege, that this entitlement they have, they can leverage it to
yeah,
actually create more equal world rather than just sit with this entitlement. Things are not going to change, and I think some men are doing that, but still
yeah,
it takes time to get over that sense of that, and that once men also learn that they are stronger and they have to look after their sisters or other women, they also get the message that they can harm other women as well, that they are stronger, they can overpower them, they can inflict
yeah, yeah,
violence, they can
yeah,
suppress them, they can get their own way. So yeah.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And I think I see this as well, even with my own kind of extended family, cousins from Kerala, uh, which is supposed to be matrilineal society, but I don't quite know what happened. But the expectation is that if there are sort of young boys in the room and there are women, that the boys don't get up and do
Mhm.
anything. It's like they expect the women to bring them things, and this carries on. These are educated, liberal young men, but I think this kind of conditioning runs so deep that they don't even realize they're doing it. They just do that. They just think that's the norm
Yeah,
without ever
that's
questioning it.
true. And sometimes they feel, oh, I can't be the only one doing it or breaking this because I am supposed to be manly and I'm
Yeah,
supposed to be the man, and so I have to
yeah,
conform to the manly stereotypes as
yeah,
well. But
yeah, yeah,
sometimes they
yeah,
don't realize it.
yeah, 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 yeah. Something I wanted to talk about, personal to me. So I've chosen not to have children. So early on in my 30s or late 20s, I decided that that's not what I wanted to do. I am still explaining to people why I chose that, what 20 something years later. This assumption that as women we are all supposed to have children. It's so deeply ingrained. It doesn't matter how liberal somebody is, it doesn't matter whether they're from India or grew up in the West. The assumption is you are a woman, therefore you will have a child. It used to really
Yeah,
annoy me, and then
exactly.
I stopped getting annoyed because how many times are you going to get annoyed? Uh, so, um, this idea that we must have children in order to be women, to fully be a woman. This idea that otherwise we're not really fulfilling our purpose in the world is so deep. And it always makes me question. Like, no one asks a man that. No one goes up to a man and says, "Oh, have you had a child? If you haven't had a child, why did you not have a child?"
Yeah, I'm so sorry
What?
you
Where
get
does
that,
this come
Sangeeta,
from?
because it annoys me so much. It annoys me because even with children, my worth and my value is not associated to just being a mother. Yes, I talk about being a mother, and yes, motherhood is a big part
Yes.
of my life, but I'm not just a mother, and I'm not being defined by just my children. So if the only thing that people talk to me about is my
Yeah.
children, I get annoyed about that as well. And I'm sorry that people are still doing this, asking questions, because I think there are a few things. As I said before, that the notion that all women have this inherent desire to have children. And so they think that if you're not doing that, then maybe you don't know your mind, that you would change your mind, that give it
Yeah.
time, you will come
Yeah.
around it.
Yes.
That
Yes.
there's also this notion that women don't know their mind
Yes. I've had
sometimes, you
that.
know. Yeah, yeah, we'll
Yes.
let me
Somehow,
tell you
oh, you
what you
poor thing.
think
You
and
don't
what
really
you
know you
want.
want that.
Yes, exactly. So
What you
so
want.
that's
Yeah.
also the perception that you she doesn't really know it, she's too young, or you're just young, you don't know
Yeah.
it yet, or you will want them one day, and maybe it'll
Yeah.
be too
Yeah.
late by
Yeah.
then, and then this creates this panic inside women. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, what if it's too late, and then what am
Yes.
I going to do? So let me start
Yes.
thinking about it. So even if women don't
Yeah.
want children or are ambivalent about it, they're not given space to have this ambivalence or this uncertainty, even because they have to make up their mind. Either they want it or not want it very quickly, because they have to convince not just themselves but all everybody else about what they want, and
Yeah.
that we know our minds. It's not like, oh, I'm not
Yes.
sure. You can't say
Yes.
that. You can't say I'm not sure, because
Yeah.
that's just like, oh yeah, of course you're not
No, you
sure, you're a
can't say
woman.
that.
So so yes, I think it's linked to those kind of feminine roles that we are expected to play. This notion from a very, I mean, if you look at any culture in history, in their historical documents, if you look at any
Mm.
literature, it's all about women having child, being fulfilled by having children, fulfilling their duty as being mothers and good wives. That's why infertility was so stigmatized. That's why women were not given birth or don't have children were labeled as like an outsider, ostracized or stigmatized a lot in many cultures, and we see that in the literature that comes from these cultures as well. So yes, I think it's still a shame that we are in 2022 and we're still fixed in these ideas of what a man and woman is, what a man wants, what a man should do and can do, and what a woman wants and what can do. And yes, people don't ask men because their value or their worth or their identity is not linked to fatherhood. Nobody really talks to my husband about
Exactly.
his children that much. They talk about his professional career. What are you doing? How's your job going? While I'm always just asked about how the children, what are they doing at the moment? Even if, as I'm a professional, I have a busy professional life, nobody's interested in that, and that annoys me sometimes. So I think it harms men as well, because some men who desire children can't express that desire. Some men who are really committed to having a family can feel like, oh, maybe I can't talk about it openly, or maybe I can't talk to people about my children because that's not how I should be or how I'm supposed to be. That's why stay at home fathers are still seen as anomalies sometimes. I think these gender roles harm women a lot, because obviously we are the minority. We don't have equality. These gender pay gaps still exist. All those kind of things. But I think anything like this, these binary divides harm men as much, because men are pushed into certain roles and stereotypes as well. It harms everybody. I think this happens. But yeah, it's a shame we're still talking about whether a woman has children or not. And you saw those, the Office of National Statistics that put out the data recently, the headlines, the panic around falling birth rates, and the fact that the birth rates in the last 50 years, women less than 30 are having even less children now than 50 years ago. I mean, lots have changed in 50 years. And then I went and looked at all their data sets. There was nothing about men and their reproductive choices. So why aren't you collecting data about men and their choices, and whether they are choosing to have children or not? So yes, even the data sets are biased.
Yeah, exactly. Even the data is set up to make us feel kind of less than. And I think the idea that somehow by not having children, we are A, not women, really, we're not fulfilling our roles. And the other extreme that I always get is, you must hate kids. And I'm like, no, I don't hate kids. I actually think they're really sweet. It's just that that's not what I want to do with my life. I'm not saying you shouldn't, and I think kids are wonderful. But it's this assumption. There's no like gray area between motherhood and non-motherhood. Mothers all love their kids, live for their kids. People who are not mothers hate children, are anti kind of anything nice and soft. It's this kind of
Yeah, our
weird,
society finds it
you
so
know,
easy to do binary, and this, as you say, the gray area, the nuances are forgotten and
exactly.
ignored because just our brains can't deal with it sometimes. It takes more effort to think about there can be other
Yeah,
choices,
yeah,
there can
yeah,
be other
yeah, yeah.
permutations and combinations. So it also enforces this, as you say, this perception that mothers love their children all. Yes, we love our children, but we don't enjoy being mothers all the time.
Yes.
There are times when you think, oh my gosh, what have I done? This is not the life I wanted, because you're exhausted and you just want to work and you just have no headspace. And there are lots of other
Yeah,
reasons why you think, oh my gosh, I'm just so tired of this. I wish
of course.
I could escape this. This thought occurs to so many people all the time. And in the next moment, you feel guilty. And in the next moment, you know you love them, really. But it's still, I mean, I know during the lockdown, it became more normalized for people to talk a little bit about how hard it is, because we were all in the same boat. We were all homeschooling and parenting, all caring, everybody. So I think people who had children had or didn't have children had other caring responsibilities, so everybody was juggling a little bit. So it became more normal to talk about, yes, it is hard, we don't enjoy it, and people were talking about it in social media. Before that, I think even when I started writing Motherhood, there was always this thing that you had to qualify the statement by saying, but I love them. Even say, it is hard, but I love them. And you couldn't say, I couldn't
Yes.
say to anybody, I'm finding it really hard. I couldn't say it because I had to, like, people would say, oh, look at them, but they're so adorable. Aren't you lucky? Yes, I know that, but it should be okay to say it is a hard thing. It is a hard thing that I'm going through at the moment.
Yes.
And the same with, if you don't have children, you have to, somehow people have to justify in their heads that there must be a reason why this woman doesn't want children, because what could be the reason? It's not because she's an independent person and has opinions and can make life choices, because that's not what you're allowed to do, but it's because she doesn't love children, she doesn't have any maternal instinct, and so they have to justify it or reason it in their head
Yes.
somehow. And yeah, it is so strange.
Incredibly strange. I think coming back to what you said, that I've seen women, mothers, get vilified for saying something like that. To say,
Yeah.
sometimes I wish I didn't have to do this, or sometimes they annoy the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I could hand my kids over to somebody else and go off and do X, Y, and Z. But my God, the backlash of saying something like
Yeah.
that is incredible. I've seen that
Yeah.
happen to women
Why
on
did you even have
social
children in the
media.
first place?
And
Yeah. Why? I mean,
in the
yeah,
first
it is
place,
a lot. Often you get it
yes.
from men who are not even in the same boat. So, like, why are you telling me how I should feel? But if other women have as well who have internalized this and who believe that women, this is our role and our destiny, and we shouldn't really talk about it. Recently, I talked about the film Lost Daughter. I don't know if you saw
Mm.
that, The Lost Daughter, and it was so good, and it was
Yes, I thought
so,
it was beautiful.
it's shocking in time. Yeah, it's
Fabulous.
very, and
Nuanced, wasn't
and I
it?
could relate to it a lot as well, because this really desperate desire to find your own path and to create space for yourself, and you don't have that, and this be consumed by motherhood, it's a strange push and pull thing, because you constantly want to be close to your children, but you
Mm.
also at times just want to pull away and be yourself and to know who you are as
Yes,
a person, because when
yes.
you are with them, I'm just a mother, often I'm different. So I think, yes, vilified a lot. And actually, 3 years ago, I wrote about this piece about, there was a another TV series which I can't remember the name of. It was a mother who left her child and for a few months or forever or something, and there was a huge backlash in the media, but also in like newspapers, but also the TV series. This she was is created as a monster. And I thought about why is it that women who leave or step away are seen as such monsters? Because I think we cannot imagine that a mother would ever leave their children or want to be away from this role of motherhood, that is your destiny or purpose in life. So I think we need to, as I say, again have more of these conversations, I suppose, have more honest open conversations about
Yeah.
how women are feeling, how men are feeling about our reproductive choices, about how what motherhood, parenting, caring actually is and what it involves, so that people can make good choices about whether to become a mother or not.
Exactly. And I think also not diminishing people, because
Yeah.
I know people who've chosen to have pets, or know people who've chosen to be close to their nephews or nieces, and to them that's how they express that part of themselves. And I think to allow for a society where all of those are okay and acceptable, I think
Yeah,
is probably the way
families, we need
forward.
to get away from this kind of very traditional white picketens, fence, two children, heteronormative ideal of a
Yeah,
family. Families can be
yeah,
made in very different ways. Love can be expressed in many different ways. And I think the more we realize that about these connections that we make with people and how we form families and how we break away these kind of notions of traditional notions of family, I think the more inclusive we can be as a society.
absolutely. And I think it's something
Yeah.
I personally struggle with, this idea of family, because I don't really have a family. And because society tells me all the time that
Yeah.
this is what family looks like and mine doesn't. So it's a huge struggle and conflict kind of within me as well. So I think if society started to broaden that out, I
Yeah,
think life would be a lot
absolutely.
easier for people like me. Talking about other aspects of motherhood, so I think we touched upon this. Women who say cannot have kids and want to have kids, the stigma behind that. I remember growing up in South Asia, like somebody would talk about ex-woman and she's barren, and these even the words were so harsh. The language around that was awful. Can
Yeah,
you
I
talk a
think
little
as
bit
you
about
said, the
that?
word barren is means that you, as a woman, as I said, because you're supposed to give birth easily, you're supposed to be fertile soil, you're a mother earth, you're
Yeah,
supposed to reproduce easily, and
yeah, yeah,
that should happen naturally and without any
yeah,
effort. And so when that doesn't happen,
yeah,
you are stigmatized. And it was, I mean, again, things are changing a little bit, but I remember even as a child, people,
mm,
certain women who were either not married or who didn't have children, who were seen as barren, were not allowed to be part of religious ceremonies or to stand in as part of, like when we used to have those havan and all those things, because they were considered inauspicious.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I remember feeling really shocked by that, thinking, how can you label somebody inauspicious? Why is it
yeah,
like that, that that person is sitting in the other room? I felt awful about that. And I remember doing, yeah,
yeah,
seeing that so much. And if you read through the scriptures, even Egyptian, South Asian culture, and other societies as well, yeah, infertility is in Bible as well. Infertility is stigmatized. Um, because you're not being a real woman. There's something wrong with you. And I think that's when you see these messages. And I know there's been some TV programs recently which have dealt with this issue, but the grief of not being able to do what your body does is a very unspoken grief, that space in between where you're not a mother, you want to be a
mm,
mother, but you cannot be a mother. And you go through these infertility treatments and IVF rounds, and every time there is hope, and every time there is this ray of light, and then it goes
yeah,
away again. So this grief is very unspoken. You can't really talk to anybody about it because you think there is something, there's a lot of shame. I mean, I carried a lot of shame, and I carried a lot of this
yeah,
burden on myself that I'm not being able to do what I'm supposed. Why is it? What's wrong with me? Why can't I just work the way I'm supposed to work? And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah, I think again, the we internalize this shame and stigma, and silences are created around this shame, which means that people don't tell their stories, don't talk about it. I know that now we are hearing more stories from South Asia and people about infertility, about fertility, about desire to not have children, about all the issues that used to be taboo in the
Yeah.
past. But there's still a lot of
Mm.
silence
Yeah.
around this, and that affects
Shame and
people's mental
silence
health. And mental health is
around it.
again
Yeah,
something we
absolutely.
don't really talk about openly in our community.
Yeah, of course. Of course. We could do a whole episode on mental health. I think the other thing is when if society says that your value is attached to you being able to have a child or wanting to have a child or being able reproducing really, then somehow takes away the value when you lose that ability. So when we go into menopause or we're approaching menopause, there's that sense that, oh, okay, my time here is over. Everybody's telling me that that was kind of my useful years, and now I'm supposed to sort of go away quietly, wear really dull colors and not be visible and all of this stuff, right? No,
Yeah.
certainly not be like sexual or out there or like, what are you even doing? Your time is over, and I get
Yeah,
that sense. Do
absolutely.
you
And
get
I
that
think
as well?
ageism, I mean, if we speak just about the South Asian community, I think it's a very ageist society. Yes, older people are looked after
Yes.
because we live in joint families often, and people look after their parents and don't send them to care homes very much. And so people live together. But the moment a woman goes over a certain age, or even men, I suppose, but more women because it intersects with gender, they're seen as so old. She's now so old. So, and you quickly become very
Yes.
young to
Yes.
very old very quickly in that society, and there's no in between. Where I was just young yesterday, so
Yeah.
what happened overnight?
Now I'm really
So,
old.
yeah, I think it's a very ageist society as well. But ageism is embedded in our society anyway, even in
Yeah.
the West. Uh, as
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, menopause is being talked about now, but workplaces didn't talk about
Yes.
menopause. People didn't talk about menopause. Even women didn't know
Yeah.
anything about menopause. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
my menopause was triggered because of the
No.
IVF treatments. I didn't know that a menopause could happen so
Mm.
young. So it's
Mm.
like, oh, this happens when you're like 50, 55, 60, or whatever. So I have a long way to go, and this is just
Mm.
like
Mm.
I'm not having my
Mm. Mm.
periods, whatever. So, and then my doctor said, so how long ago did
Mm.
you have your period? And then I was like, oh, okay, so this is what's happening now, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do, so let's not talk about it. So you feel suddenly, oh my God, I can't be having menopause. I'm not that
Yeah.
old, because you associate age with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and you associate
Yeah.
once you be over a certain age, you're over the
Yes.
hill, and so your life is over now. And so what are you
Yes.
supposed to do with your life?
Yes.
And I suppose we need to
Yes.
address
Yes.
and
Yes.
challenge these perceptions. And that is
Yeah.
why you have all these,
Absolutely.
often often in Daily Mail, but in other newspapers, when older women dress a certain
Yeah.
way, there are all these
Yeah.
questions about their dress too young or their dress
Yeah.
inappropriate for their age.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, older women are just seen supposed to be invisible. Yeah.
Go away quietly. Yeah. I get this a lot. So I'm sort of perimenopausal. I think I'm about to hit menopause, and everywhere that I see, the messaging is exactly the same. It's like we're supposed to want to look young, first of all, and that's supposed to be complimentary. And then, and then as we get older, we're supposed to
Yeah.
hide how old we are as well. So I happily tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm about to be this age. And I feel really proud because I'm like, I've
Yeah.
got to this age. It's a big deal. But in society, like in a group, I notice nobody says that. And it's like I've said something really like you can hear the silence when you say, "Oh, I'm about to be 50 this year." So everybody goes really quiet. So you're not, like
On.
this whole fixation
Yeah.
on all of us being young, wanting to be young, hiding our age, and certainly as we grow older, we're supposed to like go away quietly. Is what I kind of pick up
Yeah, I think there
from
is a
a
very
lot of
narrow
groups.
window. Congratulations, by the way, for the big 50, because that's
Thank
going to
you.
be fantastic. And it's amazing that we get to that age, and that's still working.
Yes.
Because we were made to believe.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah.
To me, I feel like I'm still here.
Um, and we got your wits about you, because 30 years ago, people would when I was a kid, I thought by the time you're like 40, you are almost like nothing. Instead.
Yes, me too. Me too. I used to
Yeah,
think, like, I used to look at my mother who was 40 when I was, in my 20s. And I
yeah,
was like, oh, that's so old. And it wasn't just in my head. I think it
yeah.
was
How they
how
start
society
dressing, how
was
they
as well.
start
Like,
looking,
she
how
was
they start
wearing,
walking and acting.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
clothes were not
yeah,
whatever, walking, acting, saying, oh, I'm so old now and I can't really do this and I should not be
yeah.
doing that, and all of these kind of things, around being old. So I think it wasn't just my imagination. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's how people were. So in a way, like, it's quite confusing for my brain. Like, when I think about, like, oh, so I'm about to be 50, and 50 is really, really old.
No, you
But I don't really feel like that. So I don't quite know how to,
That's
you know.
fantastic. But I do think that with women, there's a very narrow
So
window. So younger women are
yeah,
infantilized quite a lot as well. So they're treated as girls, or they don't
yes,
know their
yes,
mind, or they're really young and seen as that and expected to like be
mm,
and not taken seriously. So younger women are not taken seriously often. In some
mm,
circles, they're
mm.
kind of
Yes, yes, yes.
idealized a little bit as well. So we know in publishing, the younger the writer, the
Mm,
like, oh, it's
mm,
such a young writer, debut and all
mm,
that stuff
mm.
happens. Under 30
Yeah,
awards,
yeah, yeah,
it's a big
yeah.
discussion there. But but then they're seen as old quite quickly as well. And oh, as we're talking about, after a certain
Yes,
age, they are not again taken
yeah,
seriously. And we see in films and media there's very few representation from older women. And older, I mean, like over the age of
yeah.
40, and that is not old. um
Yes,
yeah, so over the
that
age of
is not
40, I
old.
know
Yeah.
some actor friends who start getting like mother roles, and like of mother of like adult men who are
Yeah.
older than them sometimes. and,
Yeah.
and they're a bit confused, like he's older than me and he's playing my son.
I couldn't possibly have given birth to him.
So yeah, it's a very narrow window, when because that's their fertility window, I
Yeah, yeah,
suppose.
yeah,
And so
yeah. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
yeah, before
that's
and after
exactly it.
there.
So
Yeah.
if we're being told, yeah, if we're being told that our value is our
Yeah.
kind of fertile years, so after those years, goodbye, is the message really. Whether, however we look at it, like we dress it up and we say, oh, this, that, or the other, whether it's your actor friends, whether it's creative people, whether it's, I don't know, models, whatever, we're told that past a certain age, you're in your prime is a good word. I don't even know what the
Yeah.
word is, but basically go away.
Yeah.
We don't want you
That's why
here,
we
is
have
the
these terms
message,
like,
right?
I was confused when I was going through fertility cycle. I was called a geriatric mother, and I was like, I'm not geriatric. I'm not even 40
Yes.
yet.
Geriatric mother.
Then I realized that actually, if they're over the age of 35, you're called a geriatric mother.
Yeah, yeah,
Geriatric.
yeah, yeah.
Shocking.
Exactly. Exactly. Seriously. Stop it, is what I want to say. Um, so I guess the bigger point is that society is always trying to monitor, control,
Mm-hmm.
manage women's bodies. And this whole conversation, whether that's menopause, whether that's motherhood, whether that's whatever, are kind of values attached to our bodies
Mm.
via fertility. And if society can find a way to manage and monitor that, then they keep hold of us, really. If we're constantly worrying about whether we're too old, whether we should have babies, not have babies, we're not going to go on protest marches. We might be too, do you know what I mean? So I think it's a way to control. This
No,
is
that's a
my,
very true. Yeah, it's a really
personal
good
belief. What do you
interpretation,
think?
because it's the way the patriarchy wins. It's a misogyny's way of keeping us in our place, really. The more we struggle against
Yeah,
these
yeah,
things, the more we worry about these things, the more we discriminate or get biased against other women, the more conflict that's created between women itself. That's how patriarchy wins.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I love something I think I read in one of the interviews about you talking about motherhood, and I love the fact that I think you're probably one of the few women that I know that are having these nuanced conversations. It's not like, oh my God, everything's amazing or everything's awful. You're having an in between, which is what life is like. It's complex. Um, could you talk about your own journey of motherhood and what that's like? How does it feel, the emotions of
Oh
it?
gosh, it's such a roller coaster. So yeah, as I said, I was married before, and I was married quite young. I had a
Yeah.
child. She was a very complicated pregnancy. I was very young. I didn't really know what I was really, and I was really trapped in this kind of very
Mm.
toxic relationship. coercive kind of family situation dynamic. I was really struggling, and I had a child, a girl child, who I realized wasn't desired. Even in such a rich family, they had very strong views about it, and I almost died. I came back from death. I lost 5 units of blood, hemorrhaged, all that happened. Then I realized, I don't know, it was a really, at that time, you don't process these emotions. You just think I'm alive and I'm okay and I've got a child and she's alive who could have died during that very complicated 4 months bed rest before then. And so you kind of just get through. And then I came here to do a master's on a scholarship, and I think that's the first time I kind of stepped, when you step away from a harmful, toxic situation, sometimes you can see it more clearly and you realize, actually, this is not what I want in my life. This is not how I want my child to be raised in such a situation. She deserves better. She deserves more. So that's the first time I think I felt really empowered. I have talked about it in my book that I think motherhood, that first experience was very liberating, but also kind of an act of rebellion, because it made me feel empowered, not just for myself and for her as well, that I'm responsible for this person. I want to raise her outside these kind of traps of patriarchy and misogyny. She deserves better. So we were here, and I was an academic. I got married again, and we tried to have, I was a single parent for a while, and then I got married again, and um, I we tried to have children again. I was kind of ambivalent about it because people kept saying, "Oh, you almost died the first time." But I suppose there's always, as I said, ambivalence is hard to manage and talk about, because you think time's running out, so I need to make this decision rather quickly. And I didn't realize how much time has already run out, because 5 cycles, nothing happened. It was quite painful, traumatic.
Yeah.
We had to make a decision. We had children through surrogacy. It's a gestational surrogacy, and so they're now going to be 6 years old this year, twin girls. Um, that was also very complicated. There's a lot going on in my life, illnesses and other things, chronic illnesses. So I suppose I was still kind of grappling with this idea of, how do I become a mother again when I'm in a different context? And would I love my children the same way like I loved my older daughter? And now she was becoming like an older teen and almost an adult, and I was having these little children. So I was a mother to an adult and a mother to small children, and I was like kind of in between, trying to juggle those two roles, because you're a very different mother
Yeah.
to two different
Yeah.
kinds in different life stages. So I think, and then my relationship with, we were very close with my older daughter, but we had some hiccups, and 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 I think I had to step back and reflect on my my behaviors, things that I can unlearn, my words, my actions, things I might have done to harm her, things I might had done unintentionally because I didn't know any better, things that she saw differently than how I saw the story. And you realize there's a situation and there's a story, and people see the situation differently in different ways. So I think our relationship also had to evolve from how it used to be. And I think it was good
Yeah.
for us. It's really good for us. And I also feel really proud of her, that and also our relationship, that she was able to say, I want to set these boundaries, because I think I couldn't have done that with my mother, to say, I want to set these boundaries with you. And I think that honesty is something I really desire with my children as a mother, that they can tell me
Yeah.
honestly about how they're feeling, what they want to do, that I can be there to facilitate things but not impose my desires and wishes on them, that I can show them the path, but ultimately it's their path to choose, you know?
Absolutely. That's really profound, and I suppose at the end of the day, that's
Yeah.
what a mother does, right? That is really quite profound. Um, Thank you for sharing that. What projects have you got coming up?
Yeah, quite a few.
What's next for Pragya? No, I had a
No,
feeling.
but actually, I'm taking it slow. I felt like I was really exhausted and facing burnout, and I to acknowledge that as well. I think that's something that I've also realized, that with my neurodivergence, I sometimes get so hyper focused that I don't realize the impact it is having on my mental and physical health, and that this period has been really hard for all of us. And it's okay to take slow sometimes. I have a book coming out on the 1st of September, which is almost finished. The proofs are ready now, so it's just quite exciting. It's called Hysterical. So it looks into this myth of gendered emotions. Besides that, I'm doing some writing. I do quite a lot of talks and things, so that's going on. I'm working on some new ideas for books. But yeah, I'm excited to look forward to the next year and see how it shapes up.
I'm excited to hear about your new book as well. I'm sure it's going to be as amazing as the others have
Thank you.
been. Thank you so much, Pragya, for being on Masala Podcast. It's been an absolute joy
Thank you so
speaking
much,
to you.
Sangeeta, for having me. It's such a pleasure to speak with you.